Dwight D. Eisenhower was the 34th U.S. president and served in that role from 1953 to 1961. When you think about that time in American history, it was a time of great change. After World War II concluded with the surrender of Japan in 1945, the entire globe collectively breathed a sigh of relief for a short period of time. But this lasted only for a few years, as the Cold War between the United States and Russia started as early as 1947, when U.S. aid had brought certain Western countries under American influence, and the Soviets had established openly communist regimes in others. Of course, the Cold War ended shortly after the Berlin Wall came down in the late 1980s. In late 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved into its component republics, and with stunning speed, the Iron Curtain was lifted and the Cold War came to an end. But there still existed an innocence in the United States in 1953 when Eisenhower took office. And when he left in 1961, we were on the verge of new movements that would change our country forever. From the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War and anti-war protests, counterculture movements, political assassinations, and the emerging generation gap, where the baby boomers, or children born during the World War II era, seemed to go against everything their parents had previously believed in terms of music, values, government, and political views, as well as cultural tastes. What happened during those years can be quantified by sociologists and explained away as the evolution of society. But there is no doubt that great changes started taking place during the 8 years of Eisenhower's presidency. But what if I were to tell you that far more was taking place during this time than most realize, and how much of what happened back then and the world we live in today was largely a result of the meetings Dwight D. Eisenhower had with aliens? Let's dive in.
Are you not curious?
Preparing to transfer the Ryan files. Now.
I present to you, with great intrigue and wonder, the Ryan files.
Part 1. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Forces in Europe.
Dwight D. Eisenhower wasn't just any president. He was a 5-star general during World War II and the Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Forces in Europe. His command of the Normandy invasion, better known as D-Day, solidified him as a key player in global military strategy. This is crucial because a man like Ike would have had access to the deepest, darkest secrets of the U.S. government and the military. We're talking about black ops, covert operations, and you guessed it, UFO and alien-related activities. As you know, the Allies went on to win World War II in the European front and shortly thereafter ended the war with the surrender of Japan on the Pacific front on September 2, 1945. After World War II, as you might expect, Eisenhower's reputation only grew, and by 1952 he was elected the 34th President of the United States. Now, why is that important? Because Eisenhower had access to top-tier intelligence reports and classified materials that most people, even today, couldn't even begin to imagine. Some of that material included UFO sightings and encounters dating back to World War II. Remember, the UFO phenomenon didn't just start with Roswell in 1947. It had been long happening before Ike, and with his military background, would have been in the know. And this is where things get really interesting.
Part 2. Meeting with aliens.
Now to the heart of the matter, the secret meetings Eisenhower reportedly had with extraterrestrials. The first encounter supposedly took place in February 1954 at Edwards Air Force Base in California. The story goes that while Ike was on vacation in Palm Springs, he mysteriously disappeared for a night. The official explanation? He had chipped a tooth and went to see a dentist. But hold on, here's where things just don't add up. If this was just a routine dental appointment, why was there so much secrecy surrounding it? Reporters who were covering the president's vacation were given conflicting stories, and some accounts suggest he was whisked away for a top-secret meeting. And not just any meeting, a meeting with aliens. So let's take a closer look. Now, as I said before, Eisenhower's first meeting with aliens allegedly happened on February 20th and 21st, 1954 at Edwards Air Force Base, then known as Muroc Airfield in California. Here's how the event supposedly unfolded in the cover story that was put in place. At that time, Eisenhower was vacationing in Palm Springs, California, enjoying some time off. On the evening of February 20th, however, Eisenhower reportedly disappeared from public view. His absence sparked an immediate concern among the press corps, leading to a flurry of of rumors. Some journalists even feared the president might have died suddenly or suffered from a severe illness. A few hours later, White House Press Secretary James Hagerty held a press conference to explain the president's sudden disappearance. According to Hagerty, Eisenhower had chipped a tooth while eating fried chicken at a dinner party, requiring him to visit an emergency dentist. The dentist in question was Dr. Francis Purcell, a local in Palm Springs. Hagerty claimed that the president underwent a minor procedure and was resting in comfort afterwards. On the surface, this explanation seemed plausible until skeptics began pointing out some inconsistencies. First of all, there was no dental record or evidence to support that Eisenhower had undergone any significant dental procedure that evening. Later investigations into Dr. Purcell's involvement revealed that the dentist himself was never clear on the exact details of the visit. Next, the timeline didn't make sense. Eisenhower supposedly chipped his tooth during dinner, but there was no confirmation of an urgent visit, and the dentist office was closed at the time in question. Palm Springs was a small town, and the idea of a dentist being rushed in for a late-night procedure on short notice seemed suspicious. Most important was the media blackout. The White House press office was incredibly secretive about Eisenhower's whereabouts for these first few hours. This was unusual, especially for a president who was constantly in the public eye. Why wasn't there more transparency? Now, according to whistleblowers and UFO researchers, Eisenhower was secretly flown from Palm Springs to Edwards Air Force Base that night, where he met with extraterrestrial beings. Accounts suggest that Eisenhower, accompanied by high-ranking officials and scientists, engaged in diplomatic discussions with a group of Nordic aliens, the tall, human-like beings often described as benevolent. Witnesses who were present at Edwards Air Force Base later claimed they had been sworn to secrecy. According to these accounts, the meeting was an attempt by the Nordics to persuade Eisenhower to abandon the U.S. nuclear weapons program in exchange for their advanced technology and peaceful cooperation. However, Eisenhower allegedly declined this offer. After the meeting at Edwards Air Force Base, a second reported meeting took place in 1955 at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. This encounter, less publicized than the first, involved Eisenhower allegedly meeting with the Greys, the small, big-eyed extraterrestrials commonly associated with abductions and biological experimentation. Now, during this meeting, Eisenhower again was said to have mysteriously disappeared, although the press wasn't as quick to catch on this time. Official reports from that day are vague, and the incident wasn't covered as widely as the first disappearance. What's interesting here is the shift in tactics. This time it seems like the press wasn't notified of his absence at all, minimizing the need for a fabricated story. Witnesses, including military personnel and some insiders at the base, later claimed they saw multiple UFOs landing at Holloman Air Force Base, and that Eisenhower himself was present for a series of meetings that spanned over several hours. These witnesses were reportedly also sworn to secrecy and threatened with severe consequences if they leaked any information. Some of the advanced technology supposedly shared by the Greys during this meeting included early forms of stealth technology and knowledge of anti-gravity propulsion systems. The Greys were more technologically advanced than the Nordics, and they offered more immediate benefits, which may explain why Eisenhower was more inclined to make a deal with the Greys. Each time Eisenhower allegedly met with the aliens, the government employed different tactics to obscure the truth. While the dentist appointment was the most well-known excuse, later absences weren't given much explanation at all, especially as the UFO phenomenon became more classified. But researchers had pinpointed several known government tactics to dismiss the Eisenhower alien story. Let's take a look and let me know if any of these look familiar at all. False media narratives. The government used routine explanations like dental emergencies to cover up Eisenhower's sudden absences. In the 1950s, the media was far more deferential to the office of the president, and investigative reporting wasn't as aggressive as it is today, making it easier to push a false narrative. Controlling the press. In addition to the dentist story, press restrictions were imposed during Eisenhower's vacations. Reporters were not given details on the president's whereabouts, and those who were present were told conflicting information. This was a classic tactic, creating enough confusion and contradictory information to muddy the waters. Witness intimidation. Military personnel and base staff who allegedly witnessed the alien meetings were either threatened into silence or had their careers jeopardized if they spoke out. There are multiple accounts of military whistleblowers who claim they were told to forget what they saw and that their lives would be ruined if they went public. Suppression of UFO phenomenon. The 1950s and 60s saw an increase in UFO sightings across the United States, often coinciding with secret military experiments and testing of advanced aircraft. The U.S. government was quick to label most UFO sightings as misidentified weather balloons, swamp gas, or other mundane explanations. The disinformation campaign around UFO sightings was used to ensure that any public sightings of strange craft during these alleged meetings could be dismissed as paranoia or hoaxes. Limited documentation. All records of these meetings were supposedly kept off the books. Researchers have struggled to find any declassified documents or official records that confirm the events, which fits the standard procedure for deeply classified operations. When Eisenhower met with the extraterrestrials, no formal records were created, or if they were, they remained buried deep within black budget programs. The cover-ups surrounding Eisenhower's alleged meetings with extraterrestrials show a consistent pattern of disinformation and secrecy. From the suspicious dentist appointment to the unexplained absences, the official stories never seemed to match the details that emerged later from whistleblowers and UFO researchers. While we may never have definitive proof, the patterns of secrecy, the witnesses who have come forward, and the circumstantial evidence all suggest that these meetings were not only real, but were carefully concealed from the public.
Part 3. The Deal. Technology for People.
According to research, Eisenhower's administration agreed to allow the Greys to abduct a certain number of humans for medical and scientific purposes. In exchange, the Greys would provide the U.S. government with advanced technology, particularly in the fields of anti-gravity propulsion, stealth aircraft, and possibly even weather manipulation. Now think about the timing. The 1950s saw the rise of incredible technological advancements, particularly in the military. Was this just a coincidence? Or was it the result of alien technology being reverse engineered? Many believe it's the latter. The stealth bomber, the rapid advances in computer technology, some say it's all connected to the deal Eisenhower made with the gray extraterrestrials. But of course, if the United States was the only country to have this information, wouldn't we be the absolute dominant world power today? No. It appears that the gray aliens were happy to develop an agenda that we see as the main objective of many secret societies today, which is to divide people, keep them at war, and by doing so, control them until eventually a one-world government is installed, which is the ultimate goal of the gray aliens.
Part 4. Russia was also contacted, and a deal was struck.
It wasn't just the US that made deals with aliens. The Soviets were in on it too. According to some reports, after Eisenhower made his deal with the Greys, the aliens didn't want to put all their eggs in one basket, so they made a similar agreement with the Soviet Union. That's right, both superpowers were dealing with extraterrestrials during the height of the Cold War. This would explain why the US and the USSR were in a constant technological arms race, yet neither side fully tipped the balance. Could this have been part of a larger galactic strategy? Maybe the aliens were playing both sides, ensuring that no one country gained too much power? Either way, the story suggests that both the US and the Soviets were benefiting from alien technology, and both were allowing human abductions to take place. Never forget, it's amazing what some people will give up in an effort to gain power.
Part 5. Eisenhower's farewell warning.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations.
If the story of Eisenhower's secret meetings with extraterrestrials is true, the consequences go far beyond a few technological advancements. They reverberate through history, profoundly shaping the structure of the U.S. government, the rise of the military-industrial complex, and the shadowy web of black budgets and secret programs that continue to operate today. So let's connect the dots and examine how these hidden forces impact the world, even now in 2024. The alien deal and the rise of black budgets. Imagine this. Eisenhower is sitting in a top-secret meeting room face-to-face with extraterrestrials who are offering technology light years ahead of anything humans could dream of. Anti-gravity propulsion systems, stealth technology, potentially even the seeds of what would eventually become the modern internet. The temptation must have been overwhelming. But there was a catch, a massive one. In exchange for this advanced tech, the aliens wanted something in return: access to human subjects for biological experiments, abductions, and genetic research. If we believe that Eisenhower agreed to this deal, he was faced with an immediate dilemma. This wasn't something that could be disclosed to the public. Can you imagine the panic, the outcry, if people knew their government was making deals that involved human abductions? It would destroy the very fabric of society. So the deal had to be kept secret at all costs. And this is where things get complicated. To hide something as monumental as this, the government needed a system of secrecy far beyond anything that had existed before. It needed untraceable funding, classified research projects, and a structure so compartmentalized that even many high-ranking officials wouldn't know what was really going on. Enter the era of the black budget, the portion of the U.S. federal budget allocated to classified or secretive projects. These budgets were designed to fund operations that Congress and the general public would never see. Programs like the development of advanced aircraft, cyber warfare tools, and, as many conspiracy theorists believe, reverse engineering alien technology. From the 1950s onward, black budgets expanded to unimaginable levels, effectively creating a shadow government with access to unlimited resources. In fact, even today, the exact amount spent on black budget programs is unknown. Estimates suggest that tens of billions of dollars, if not more, are funneled annually into these secret projects. And the origin of this shadowy financial system? It all leads back to Eisenhower's time in office and the extraterrestrial agreements that had to be kept from the public. Oh, and by the way, your taxes are paying the bill. The birth of the military-industrial complex. Now here's where it gets interesting. As Eisenhower was making these secret deals, he was also overseeing the post-World War II boom in defense spending. The U.S. had emerged from the war as the world's dominant superpower. With the Cold War heating up, the government was pouring massive amounts of money into the military. But what started out as a legitimate defense strategy quickly morphed into something much more insidious. The alien deal accelerated this process. You see, when Eisenhower struck that bargain, the military and the intelligence agencies weren't just receiving conventional weapons or tanks. They were getting technology far more advanced, far more dangerous. To manage this, the government had to work hand in hand with private contractors like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and other defense companies that would eventually form the backbone of the military-industrial complex. This led to the rise of a system where defense contractors and the military became deeply intertwined. The U.S. government needed these private companies to help reverse engineer the alien technology, and in return, the contractors received massive government contracts, often without any public scrutiny. Over time, this relation created a feedback loop. The more technology was developed, the more money the military needed to stay ahead of rivals like the Soviet Union, and the more power these defense contractors amassed. And never forget the convenient hidden caveat to all of this. Private contractors like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, etc. are not subject to oversight or FOIA requests. They are private companies, and they literally have their own security forces to keep their secrets. Even though your tax dollars are funding them, you will never be able to know the truth about what they are doing. And so the standard operating procedure became simple. This new technology, whether it was stealth bombers or advanced radar systems or satellite networks, it was so classified that only a small group of insiders had any idea it even existed. Even within the government, most officials weren't briefed on what was really happening. This secrecy went hand in hand with the growing influence of the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower's farewell warning. By the time Eisenhower was leaving office in 1961, just 6 years after his meeting with the Nordics and 5 years after the deal was struck with the Greys, he had seen the results of his deal with the aliens, and he was deeply concerned. In his famous farewell address, he warned the American public about the dangers of the growing military-industrial complex. Here's a crucial part of that speech.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Unwarranted influence? By who? Many believe that this wasn't just a warning about the arms race or unchecked defense spending. Eisenhower knew that the secret agreements, the black budgets, and the military-industrial complex had spiraled out of control. The very system that had been created to deal with the alien technology had grown so large, so powerful, that even the president himself couldn't fully control it. And as a little side note, while all this was going on during Eisenhower's 8 years in office, the relatively new government agency called the CIA grew by more than 3 times during his 2 terms. Some theorists even suggest that Eisenhower's warning was a thinly veiled attempt to clue the public in on the extraterrestrial influence lurking behind the scenes. By then, the government had become so dependent on alien technology that there was no turning back, and Eisenhower knew it. That was 1961. So where are we today, 60 years later? The shadowy structures created in the wake of Eisenhower's alleged alien deal didn't fade away after his presidency. In fact, they only grew stronger. Over the years, we've seen the rise of clandestine government agencies, black op programs, and a level of secrecy so deep, it stretches the bounds of democracy. And let's break down some of the real-world consequences in this secrecy. Technological breakthroughs. Much of the technology we take for granted today, stealth aircraft, drones, GPS, the internet, can be traced back to military research, often done in secret, potentially using reverse-engineered alien technology. But these advancements come with a price. The general public is usually unaware of how these technologies were developed or the full scope of their capabilities. Thus, they're not available to the public, but only to the military of the government you pay taxes to. Unaccountable power. Black budgets continue to fund secret projects that are invisible to public oversight. Even Congress, tasked with overseeing government spending, has limited knowledge of where this money goes. Think about that. Elected officials have no idea how billions of taxpayer dollars are being spent because the funds are funneled into projects so classified that they don't officially exist. I challenge anyone to show me where this is justified in the Constitution. And once again, I can't say it enough. It's our tax money being used for these projects. The expansion of the surveillance state. Over time, the tools developed under the guise of national security have been turned inward. Mass surveillance programs, advanced data mining, and cyber operations are now used to monitor not just foreign adversaries, but also U.S. citizens. This surveillance state grew out of the need to maintain secrecy around classified technology and operations, technology that may have come from extraterrestrial sources. If you have any doubts, just ask Edward Snowden. Global military dominance. the U.S. continues to maintain an overwhelming military presence worldwide, often justified as a way to deter threats like terrorism or hostile nations. But behind the scenes, much of this dominance is underpinned by advanced, highly classified technology, potentially the result of alien deals made decades ago. This has led to an arms race with other countries, either trying to catch up or, as some theorists believe, making their own deals with extraterrestrial entities, as the Soviets allegedly did. A new kind of oligarchy. The military-industrial complex isn't just about the military. It's about the corporations and the elites who profit from secrecy and war. Defense contractors and private companies wield immense influence over U.S. policy, often pushing for more military intervention, more secret projects, more government spending, again, which is our tax dollars. And because these corporations operate in the shadows, there's little accountability. This oligarchic structure is a far cry from the transparent democracy Eisenhower likely envisioned, or the founders of this country.
Part 6. The Road Ahead.
So where does this leave us today? If Eisenhower's deal with the aliens set the stage for the rise of the military-industrial complex, then we're living in a world shaped by that fateful decision. The structures of secrecy that were created to hide the truth from the public have only expanded, and the government's relationship with defense contractors and private corporations has grown ever and ever more fuzzy. We still see the effects of this in the massive defense budgets passed each year, the surveillance state that watches over our citizens, and the endless wars fought in the name of security and progress. And perhaps most chilling, we still don't know the full extent to what's been kept hidden from us. The extraterrestrial deal, if true, wasn't just a trade of technology for abductions. It was a trade that came with profound implications for freedom, democracy, and the control of knowledge. And that shadowy secretive government, rooted in Eisenhower's era, continues to pull the strings to this day. And the extent of the power and control that this system exerts is definite. Fight it, and you will likely end up mysteriously killed, missing, or destroyed financially or publicly. This is the world we live in. On a final note, let me inject my own little thoughts into this matter. I am not convinced that aliens come from other planets and other galaxies millions of light years away. I believe that they are demonic in nature, or fallen angels, or even perhaps good angels. And as I say again and again, there is a battle going on for the souls of humanity. And it's amazing to me that everything I research always comes back to that simple fact. So the deal Eisenhower made was not with aliens in the sense of beings from a far-off planet in another galaxy. It was with beings who can interact with the spiritual realm as well as our own. And a contract was agreed upon. Remember how I said everything dealing with the spiritual realm has to be legal? Well, this was a legal transaction with the spiritual realm. And the results of that contract are obvious. Think of how much the United States changed between 1953 and 1961. Think of how much the world and our country has changed since 1961. And then think of all the other countries out there like Iran, the Ukraine, North Korea, and so many others who are striving to make their very own deals with this alien power.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications.
Laura Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower's great-granddaughter, has spoken publicly about extraterrestrials, government cover-ups, and secret programs. She has claimed that extraterrestrial contact and classified government activities, including those involving her great-grandfather, are real. As for me, well, while I don't believe we're talking about aliens from another star system, I do believe that this entire story could be true. There are creatures from the spiritual realm who want nothing more than contact with humanity, and they are willing to share great knowledge. But there's always a price, and so one has to wonder, is the world we live in today part of the price being paid for this knowledge from the spiritual realm? Thank you for tuning in this week to the Ryan Files. If you enjoy this channel, please give this episode a thumbs up and be sure to stop by theryanfiles.com. Become an agent of the Ryan Files. Your support means everything, and we can't wait to have you join our community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You folks are awesome. Have an amazing week. Be kind to a stranger and stay curious out there. And I will see you right here next week on the Ryan Files.
The Ryan Files.